Hi class, today I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about correlation. Correlation is a correlational study is one kind of research design that many social scientists use in the study of lifespan development. And therefore, let's take a closer look at it. Often, a social scientist wants to see if there is some kind of a relationship between two ingredients or two factors or two variables in people's lives. For example, there was a study done by Ch1 and Associates that took a look at what the relationship was between involvement in music, musical training, participation in music, and academic achievement and IQ among college freshmen. Ch1 collected several pieces of important information. Among them were demographic things on demographic information like the participants' age, their sex, their race, their socioeconomic background, their parents' education, their ethnicity, those kinds of things. He also collected information on the participants' participation in musical training. He not only asked participants to tell him what kind of musical instrument they played, but how long they had been trained to play that musical instrument, and whether they were indeed still playing that instrument, and if so, how often did they play it? He also asked participants for their grade point average in high school, because these were entering college freshmen, and he thought that a good gauge of their academic success up to this point would have been their high school grades. So he had that. He also asked the participants to complete an IQ test. So that was another variable that he was looking at in his correlational study. He collected information also on how his study participants spent their spare time. How many hours did they spend in extracurricular sports and arts and crafts and other pastimes? Now, it's very interesting what he found. He found that there was a small but significant correlation between musical participation and IQ and academic achievement for these freshmen. He found also that the more training they had received, more years of training they had received, and the more active they were in continuing to use their music just because they enjoyed it, the greater the correlation between their involvement in music and their academic and IQ scores. So the more years of musical participation, the higher the IQ scores, the higher the GPA. That was the general trend. He also looked at whether these folks who had musical training were any more adjusted than folks who were not. And what he found was something very interesting. He found that when he looked at students who participated in sports or other curricular activities and their social adjustment, there was a real relationship between how much they participated in sports and extracurricular activities and their ratings and social adjustment. Conversely, he did not necessarily find this with folks who participated in music that had no bearing one way or another on their social adjustment scores. It did have a bearing on their IQ and their achievement scores. The other thing that Ch1 found was that the earlier the participants had begun to receive musical training in life, the more impact it had on their academic achievement and their IQ score. So there was some correlation between when they started participating in music, and not just the length of musical participation, but generally there was that positive correlation as well. Now, when we look at a correlation study, we need to, first of all, recall, and this is very important, that correlational studies do not measure and are not indications of cause and effect. They do not prove cause and effect. What they do show is that there is some connection, some relationship between, or none, between variables that the researcher is looking at and measuring. So what we can conclude from Schoenberg's study, which was published in the Journal of Educational Psychology in 2006, is that children who receive musical education at an early age and persist in receiving musical training and engaging in musical activity are more likely, we might have predictive value here, to have higher IQ scores and higher GPA averages than students who had no musical training. Now, one does not necessarily cause the other. We just know that there is a relationship between amount of musical training and level of IQ or level of a GPA. So the other thing that I'd like to point out, as you may recall from your textbook, is that correlation is measured using a coefficient called the correlation coefficient. It's a little r. And that correlation coefficient can have a range of values from a negative 1.0 to a positive 1.0. A correlation can either be positive or negative. If a correlation between two variables is positive, it means that when one rises, the other also rises. If the correlation coefficient is negative, if there is a negative correlation between two variables, it means that as one variable rises, the other variable would decrease. The strength of the correlation may be either a increase from 0 to a +1 or from 0 to a -1, with +1 or -1 being the strongest correlation. So you could have a very strong negative correlation, in which case someone might have a 0.98 correlation coefficient, a negative 0.98, or you could have a very strong correlation between two variables, in which case the correlation might be 0.85, a plus 0.85. So as you can see, you can have a strong correlation, either a negative one, or a strong correlation that's a positive one. In the case of Schoenberg's study, and this is the case with most correlational studies, it's very rare to have anything that approaches 1.0 or negative 1.0. Most correlations may be something like 0.4 or 0.25. To show that there is a significant correlation between two variables, but not necessarily that one completely coincides with another in terms of strength. So that's a brief thumbnail view of correlational studies. And the take-home message here, and I want you to remember this, is that in a correlational study does not prove cause and effect. Instead, it takes a look at the relationship between variables. Usually the researcher looks at variables that would occur naturally in the circumstances or the environment of their participants. And that's all she wrote for right now.